Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. It's time again for another American TESOL Institute webinar with your host, Jason R. Levine, better known as Fluency MC. I have the great pleasure and honor of hosting this webinar series. We're here once a month with a new topic for English language teachers around the world, whether you're getting started with ATI or another school or certification process, you haven't started teaching yet, or maybe you're a beginner teacher, someone who's been doing it for a few years or many years, like myself, an old guy. Anyway, we're really excited always to connect with you wherever you are, whoever you teach. And yeah, we hope these monthly webinars can serve as teacher development for you, whatever you're doing, the learners you have, the ages, the levels, the countries where you teach. And this week, we're back with the focus on learner autonomy, something that arguably has always been important, but these days is more important than in the past. Or you could look at it the other way, that maybe in the past it was needed more than it is today because we take it for granted. In other words, maybe you have learners that are already learning autonomously that would not have done so in the past, almost could not have. But anyway, we're going to get into all of this with this month's American TESOL Institute webinar, Beyond the Classroom, Fostering Learner Autonomy in English Language Teaching. Such an interesting topic for myself as a teacher, because I've certainly evolved, as I think most teachers who have taught as long as I have, 26 years, from not really knowing what to do on this subject at all, really messing it up, to now having more insight into my mistakes and how to make it work better. So I hope I can help you with insights I've learned from my experience. So Hollick in 1981, I believe, was the first person to put it this succinctly. It's the ability to take charge of one's own learning. And that certainly doesn't mean that you're only learning on your own. To take charge of something, then you could paradoxically get more people involved as you are more responsible and more into learning. So calling on resources, human resources like your teacher, other learners, more than you would have before. So it certainly doesn't mean you're learning on your own without any help. When we started, I got into something that I want to talk about later. But well, how about right now? Just the idea of, how important was it in the past as an English teacher to foster autonomy compared to now? Was it harder in the past, easier? Are there different ways to think about it, I think. One thing for sure is that it's super important. So let's look at why it's important if you haven't already started thinking about that. For me, the biggest one is how many hours I have with students. And there are teachers out there who are fortunate. I think they're fortunate. Maybe they think it's too difficult sometimes, but fortunate to be with a group of learners consistently. Like, you teach students in a program where you have them half the day, every day, or even every day for a couple hours, as opposed to what I have, which is often a group once a week or twice a week only, and then just for a couple of hours. So in any case, even if you've got a group that you see very often, it's still important, but of parallel importance when you're just with them for a little while, especially if it's in a country where English is not a widely spoken language. So for example, France, where I am, the opportunity in the classroom is to connect in English and speak English. Might be the only time they do it, but we can't let that happen. And that's the point of this webinar, right? So if that should not be the only time they are engaging in English, for so many different reasons that we'll touch on. So If they are getting English outside their classroom, they will make more progress more quickly, and the learning will not be superficial. It'll be a deeper learning. These are all things we're going to get into. And, because they're learning more deeply, they'll be more motivated and confident, and a friendly cycle develops, right? If they're more motivated and confident, then the learning will be deeper. And then this is something that they can then continue their life with, not just with learning English or learning a language, learning anything, right? If you have the skills to learn autonomously, if you have that motivation and confidence, then you will, in most cases, continue to do it. And of course, the vicious cycle works the other way. That if you don't have it, you may struggle with learning things in the future, not only English or another language. So, how does it happen? And what are the characteristics of autonomous learners? I've divided that into two pieces. So let's start with the idea or the notion of how it happens. Is that a notion? Anyway, so this is really interesting to me because I've met learners along or over the years as a teacher who fall into two different categories. And the one first category is the being in the right place at the right time, which can have nothing to do with the teacher, although it's really important what a teacher can do with a learner like that. So let me explain what I mean. For example, I have a daughter. My daughter, her friend, one of her friends from a few years ago, was in a bilingual program, because my daughter is bilingual, not because she had a parent who was bilingual and or any contact with relatives who spoke English or even friends. How it happened was she was at a friend's house when the friend's cousin was there showing her, I believe it was Roblox. But anyway, some game where you need to use English. And what got this friend hooked on the game was not, oh, I want to chat in English with people. It was, I want to, get further in this game. I want to, build a better house or whatever. And English was necessary to do that, especially English in video tutorials, which I'll mention in another example later. So anyway, this girl just happened to be there, got into it, and from there, started listening to music in English, started watching things in English, started making friends in English, and guess what? She became not bilingual, but C1 as a 13-year-old girl, just because she was in the right place at the right time. Now, if you have students like that, then getting them more engaged in what you're doing will be a lot easier usually, and also they can then help students kind of hook them into English, but more on that later. So the other thing is, as a teacher, what do you do? Do you encourage students to be in situations where they'll get into English because being in the right place at the right time doesn't happen to everyone? Or are you a teacher who does things like, and I used to be one of these teachers, so don't feel bad if you are, if you agree with me, who says things like, oh, there's English is out there, just go get it. What are you waiting for? Where your heart might be in the right place. You're not scolding them. I hope you're not doing that. But even that kind of pressure, that idea of, go get English, to me, it's like, a friend saying, you should join a gym. I go to the gym. There's so many gyms out there. It's so easy to get exercise, right? That kind of motivation, encouragement, I think is negative for most people. So we will talk about how teachers can do explicit things to help motivate students. I'm certainly not suggesting that you just, uh, disconnect and just say, go out and have fun and then it'll happen. No, 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 no. And that's why I'm saying encourages. So encourages how we're going to get to some specific things that teachers can do. But be careful of the pressure, that idea of just, you can learn autonomously, go out there and get English. It's everywhere. Reacting to a hook, some sort of spark. So um, we're going to get into it right now, actually, with an example. We will get into teacher strategies, but here's one already. Reacting to a hook, some kind of sort of spark, could be outside the classroom or in the classroom. So, for example, the girl I mentioned, my daughter's friend, that's reacting to a hook, some kind of spark. It could be more about culture, like seeing a movie, right, hearing a song, and just being like, "Oh, I'm really into this cultural thing, so I want to learn English to understand it." There are many examples of this, but it could also be in the classroom. And I just want to tell the story now because I don't want you to think it has to all happen outside the classroom. So I don't know if you know Annoying Orange. I used to, when I talked about this in webinars, bring a picture of Annoying Orange. But anyway, in class one day, without planning it, I played part of a video of this, at the time, viral YouTube phenomenon, Annoying Orange. And the students were so into it. I didn't do it again with the intention of hooking them, but it happened. It was really just, I thought this was funny, but then I noticed they were so into it. And at the end, when they were like, how do I get find this video? I kind of nonchalantly told them where to find it, and that was kind of an epiphany for me, which is why I'm talking about it right away, I guess, because I realized at that moment that the students were more likely to go out and get English because of this situation than if I had, directly encouraged them to do it. And lo and behold, it happened. Not all of them, but a few of them got really into Annoying Orange. They started talking about it, and I was very careful not to be like, "Oh, you see, you connected with English outside the classroom," because that's my personality, my way of doing things. But you can also be more explicit, as I said, when you get them hooked on something, what can they do autonomously to continue learning? We're going to get into that too. And discovering something on their own, I kind of mentioned, what if they started getting into something like, some sort of song or video. So it could be that, again, not to learn English, that's not the main thing, but they need English to understand certain, a series, or get into something in music or something else. And if it's on their own, then that can obviously be very rewarding in a way that if it's introduced in the classroom, it doesn't work as well. So this really is an extension of what we're already talking about here, characteristics and habits of autonomous learners. But this is where we can really see a difference that I mentioned but didn't get into. That idea of, are you an autonomous learner because you're just kind of learning for pleasure and it's fun and you're learning along the way, something I call learning when you're not looking? Or are you somebody that, is more goal oriented? You make a plan, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I don't know, start learning English with subtitles in my native language, and then I'm going to switch them to English. I'm going to learn this many words that are important to me before next week, and how much of that is something that teachers try to cultivate and help students with, compared to just that's what they're already doing on their own. So in most cases, I feel like the goal-oriented, structured kind of approach to learner autonomy is something that is definitely not learned naturally by most people. It's something that teachers can really help instill in learners. However, it doesn't always work. In my case, it's backfired many times, but I think that's also because of my approach to teaching. So it really depends. I've seen teachers and heard great webinars and read great articles, teachers who have planned with students, very project-based learning, for example, and then, reflection on that, and then outside the classroom kind of checklists of what they're going to do. So that can really work too. So let's go through this list here. So the genuinely interested in learning for its own sake, learning when they're not looking, really the idea of intrinsic learning. This is what I focus on the most, is trying to, inspire students. So genuinely interested in learning for its own sake is a way to explain what intrinsic learning is as opposed to extrinsic learning, which is the more doing this for a specific purpose. So the example I gave of my daughter's friend, right, definitely was learning when she wasn't looking, and then being conscious of, oh, I'm learning more English and enjoying the feeling of progress and mastery that I have here, right, and moving into, watching movies in English, and then going to my daughter's school in this program at the school. I have another example. It's very similar, which is I met a student at a workshop when I was in Poland, when I was doing workshops as Fluent CMC there years ago. She was 14 years old, ran up to me, super confident, super fluent, highly accurate, everything, grammar, pronunciation. So I assumed that she had a bilingual parent or traveled a lot. Never traveled. No English in the family. I told you this was a similar story. In fact, she had never spoken English outside the classroom. She told me she loved her class and her teacher. And in her case, she was very aware that she was an autonomous learner, but it came from the same place, intrinsic motivation, where she wanted to improve also in a game. I can't believe I just realized it's exactly the same story, and was watching tutorial videos. She was a little bit older, but anyway, it was the same idea of getting repetition in the language, practicing it outside of class, that then led to her being in the classroom a very, very strong learner and becoming more goal-oriented. So in this story, I do know, because I talked to her teacher, more of starting with intrinsic learning and then becoming more focused and wanting to do well in school, get better grades, do well in the course. So that's, I think we can all agree, maybe the best pathway, but not everybody works like that, right? Whether they have a moment that's just the right place at the right time, or their personality is like this girl in Poland, where I think that has a lot to do with it. So can we as teachers help students become more goal oriented, reflect on their progress? So this girl in my example could reflect on her progress more naturally, I think. But I think other people, the majority of people, right, need to learn skills, certain strategies, how to ask, what kind of questions to ask yourself about how much you're learning. So we're going to get into that in a moment. So I already started talking about a teacher's role in developing autonomy. So let's go further, and let's also get some basics maybe that we haven't talked about. So at the very minimum, if you do a needs assessment, is not focusing just on, okay, my student doesn't know how to use the present perfect, or what is the goal for the class as a whole, but getting much more specific into individuals. I know it's hard if you have a huge group of students, or you have many students. So as much as possible, though, and I did a webinar recently where I talked about this in great detail. So that webinar was about, I believe, more beginning teachers, when you first start with groups, what to do, how do you connect with learners, it's the one about motivation. It's the most recent one, actually, about how to motivate learners. So motivation obviously is directly connected to learner autonomy. So as always, some kind of needs assessment, but if you can make it more on sort of individual values and real life goals of each student, then the students also know that you've done this and know that you know who they are. And this is going to be very important when we get into other things that you do in the classroom to try to create autonomous learning outside the classroom. So plan opportunities for hooks and sparks. I told you my story about Annoying Orange. Definitely look up Annoying Orange. He's great. But I did not plan that opportunity. However, since that time, many years ago, I have planned opportunities. The students in general did not know that they were planned. So it was more like trying to recreate that situation where just kind of, show them something funny that's in English at the end of class, or just, hey, have you guys seen this? And I think, in at least in my approach to teaching, that one of the reasons it works is because they don't know it's planned. But again, if you look at the next thing on my list here, teach strategies, I'm not against the idea of having students be aware that, this is an exercise to kind of get you into the idea of learning autonomously. I think it depends on you and how you teach. But in any case, I think there need to be opportunities where students get excited in their classroom that will then lead to them being more autonomous outside the classroom. So personally, I do not do a lot of this, strategies for goal setting, reflection, and self-assessment. I love when students share their what they do with this, or like I said before, when I watch webinars or read articles, I'm a big believer in this. But again, for certain students, at least for me, I think it probably also has to do with the fact that I'm teaching the students I'm teaching, which are more adolescents and young adults, who, at least in my experience, though they need goal setting, reflection, and self-assessment, if I try to set that up with them, it tends to, kind of fall flat. I think what works best for me, I know what works best for me through experience, is more the indirect, trying to hook them on things that will, outside the classroom, get them learning autonomously. And then goal setting, reflection, self-assessment, I don't really teach that, but I certainly notice them doing that more. But if you're teaching young learners who don't know about goal setting and reflection and self-assessment, then I think it's much, much more important. Modeling autonomous learning, that's a big one for me. There are different ways that I do it. One perhaps obvious one is, if you are learning a language, if you're teaching in another country like I am, what are your strategies? Last time when we talked about motivation, I mentioned, talking about my struggles with learning French and why it's hard to, so there's empathy that it develops there. But in this case, modeling it is, indirectly, just kind of off the cuff, saying something about how I'm trying to learn French this way or that way, but it can also be, something more direct, where I talk about my goal setting, my reflection, my strategies, of which I have very few, almost none. But what I do have are moments where I get excited about French. And so I definitely share those. Another is, the other side of that is modeling autonomous learning with English. So for example, this week, actually, I started doing something I did last year, which is bringing newspapers into the classroom, real newspapers, because I get them for free for the American Library in Paris, Financial Times, and New York Times, because they just throw them away or recycle them. So anyway, I bring them in, and this is a perfect example of how there are two ways you could do it. My way is just, hey, I've got some newspapers, English-speaking newspapers. Take one if you want when you leave. You might like it. Another approach that could also work, that works for me, not for everybody, but not everybody wants to read the newspaper. But anyway, but another approach would be, hey guys, I brought these newspapers in. I think it's really important, just to outside the classroom have something that you could read. I know it's not easy for you to find things. These I think would really help you with your business English, or learning about other cultures, or even further, incorporating it into some kind of homework assignment. But that could also foster autonomous learning if they start saying, what, I like this newspaper. I'm reading it on the subway. A student messaged me to say they loved the feeling of reading a paper newspaper on the subway. They felt like it was like old school or something like that. But anyway, we're going to talk about tech and apps and how to help model how to use apps and things. But the last thing I have here is definitely become cliche, but I love it anyway because it rhymes too. Switch from sage on the stage to guide on the side. I can't remember who said that. I think there was a book with that title. But I'm bringing it out here, especially because of what's happening with tech. So isn't it wonderful that the sage on the stage is, I mean, if you are a really cool, funny, interesting sage on the stage, that's great. But, I don't think most teachers who, dominate the classroom, with their talking, their instruction and their explanations, are engaging teachers that students like to to have as teachers. Guide on the side with tech now too. I mean, I think guide on the side to me is always the role. A teacher should facilitate, should not be the sage on the stage. But now with tech, it's interesting, right, to imagine the future where the future meaning next week, next month, 5 years. Oh my goodness! Imagine a situation where students, everything's really autonomous in the sense that they are not in a classroom setting. But of course, it's not autonomous if they've got AI and helping them, and other tech helping. But how well are they able to choose the right tech and use it to their advantage, leverage it right? That's where teachers, I think, become more important in the future. So that means we need to know how to use that tech, but also, our personalities and the kind of people we are, our emotional intelligence and how we're able to help students and empathize. I think it's going to be a balance of both, right? Knowing how to use that tech, because it's going to be probably the main way students are learning and practicing languages, but then they're going to want a teacher and need a teacher both to help them figure out what text to use, and also because they're going to want somebody for emotional support and motivation, a human being. So guide on the side. I think when they started talking about this, maybe this was 10 years ago, this book or whatever, this was before AI. So I think, it's not just let's switch from stage on the stage to guide on the side, but guide on the side is going to be the only the only role, the only job if you're going to teach, which I think is great. But we still have classrooms. So in the classroom, what can you do? So kind of more concrete strategies compared to what I've been talking about before. I mentioned a few things, but let's get more into concrete things you can do. So a very important one is choices during activities. If you are directing everything, it's going to be really difficult or impossible for a student outside the classroom to think, oh, I'm in charge of learning English, right? I'm in charge of my own learning. So I don't think it's enough necessarily just provide some choices and expect students outside the class to become autonomous learners. Not at all. But so this is kind of a basic thing, right? And choices here, I mean choices with from which essay topic to respond to which project they're going to work on, to who they want to be in groups with. That's a big one too, I think. At the same time, there are moments where it's important that you decide groups and put people together, also to promote autonomous learning, because I've found, I don't know if teachers who who've had some years of experience have found this over time, but I've gotten better at knowing, and this is also knowing your students, doing needs assessment, who to put with whom at certain, not all the time, but especially with levels. If there's a higher level person, and they might just be higher level in listening compared to writing, right? But that could be with somebody else to kind of mentor them, just maybe in that activity, or it could be an ongoing project. But anyway, the point is that how this connects to autonomous learning, we can see lots of different benefits, is often that higher level student is learning more autonomously. The students, like the student I mentioned from Poland, when she's in the classroom with other students, I would hope the teacher is strategically putting her with students that she'll inspire and indirectly or maybe even directly teach strategies to. And I see at the bottom here, have learners share strategies, but it's also personalities too. So if a student is quiet compared to more outgoing, would it be better for them to be together or not? These are things to really think about for many reasons, as I said. But in terms of autonomous learning, you know when they leave the classroom, if they had a good experience with someone who was excited about English or helped them learn English, not just you, I think there's going to be more chance that they will feel more confident to do it outside the classroom as well. There are many things I could have put here. I put recording and keeping journals because I think those are two that have really worked a lot for me. Again, connected to the idea of autonomous learning. Let me explain. So if a student is recording themselves reading something, recording like a journal, recording, not just writing in a journal is another way, or, practicing something that they're going to present, whether they send it to you or not, if they reflect on it, listening to themselves, this, I think, in many cases, kind of breaks this barrier with autonomous learning, right? Where if they hear themselves and also they see their own writing, if they're motivated to do it, and that's a big one, and it takes time to figure this out. But recording both audio and writing instills, I feel, in learners an idea that, I want to kind of keep track of what I'm doing. I want to improve my speaking and writing. So that really works very well. And it's also the reflection on it. So when you do these activities with recording and journals, there's a lot of reflection involved, especially with recording. What do you think about your English? What do you want to improve? This kind of thing can really help. And they feel much more like the individual attention if they're doing things like recording themselves and keeping journals. Fun and meaningful assignments outside of class, especially when they connect to what you're going to do in class. So, recording yourself could be part of homework, keeping journals. But what I'm thinking here, for example, is if if there's, for example, like a song or a poem or a story or, some content for class that you want them to be prepared for, what activity can you do, what they can do outside of class to prepare to talk about that song or that movie or that story, right? So if you just say, well, watch the video or answer these questions, that's not usually so good. But if you give them an activity like a gap fill, where they have to listen to part of a video, and they have part of the script, and they have to catch the words, and they have to go back and repeat it again. They're going to come to class. They're going to feel like that was kind of a fun activity, more kind of a challenge. You could even make it like friendly competition, like who could get the most words kind of thing. This can be a little tricky now with AI. So these students are just going to cheat. That's a whole nother webinar that I hope to do in the future too. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use AI as a tool compared to cheating with it. But anyway, so back to that example, if they come to class having done something like that, they're going to really feel more confident and ready to discuss the song, the video, the magazine article, whatever it was that you gave them to do, because they repeated with it. They did something where they got multiple exposures to it. They're going to remember it more. They're going to know it more. Teaching strategies, again, not something that I do as much. I definitely do it. Let me back up a minute. It's not that I don't teach strategies, but I don't do it so explicitly, like, okay, today I want to teach you how to study vocabulary, or this lesson is about active listening, or how to understand reading from context, even if you don't know all the vocabulary words. These are things that I do kind of along the way. But I will say that that's probably also because I've been teaching so long, I can certainly remember days where it was much more of a structured lesson on how to do these things. So if you need something like that, I strongly recommend generative AI, if it's a good one, like ChatGPT, to me is absolutely sufficient enough. So if you want ideas, I have something at the end to show you that ChatGPT gave me. But ChatGPT would be if I'm a beginning teacher and I know how important it is to teach active listening, but I don't know how to go about it. I would definitely use a chatbot, a good one, to help with that for sure. Once you get kind of used to it. Like if I do a listening from, I really like British Council listenings, for example. I like Voice of America. So if I do like a listening like that, how can students listen actively, using top down knowledge, not just bottom up knowledge, how to engage them, hook them on the topic before they listen, things like that. I do on my own, hoping that they get it and then we'll do it outside of class. When we talk about specific apps and things, I'll get more into that. Sharing strategies, I mentioned quickly before when we're talking about if you're mixing student groups. This is something I have definitely done explicitly with certain groups where I've thought about, okay, guys, are you doing things outside of class with English? Oh, some of you are, some of you aren't. Okay, the ones that are, what are you doing? Getting groups, share ideas, this kind of thing could lead to a student then trying something, getting hooked, and learning more autonomously. So I keep doing this in this webinar. I keep saying later we're going to talk about this. It turns out it's usually the next thing we talk about. So let's go. So there's recommending things, and then there's demonstrating things, and then there's our students really using these things, right? So first comes recommending. There is no shortage these days of good tools, apps and tools out there. There's also no shortage of bad things out there. However, it's getting easier to find things that are cheap, or you don't have to pay for at all, or you can get the basic version of them. I put some things here. BBC Learning English is not an app, it's more their website. Same thing with British Council, Voice of America. Lyrics training, I love. That's, I gave the example of listening to something and doing a gap fill. That's what lyrics training is, but they gamify it. Oh my God, it's so great. And it's been around for years. But they even have one of my songs, Fluent CMC songs, on there. So there's the recommending apps and tools, but if you just recommend them and expect students to use them, that's not so different, right? From being like, oh, there's so much English out there on the internet, go find English, listen to English, watch people English, listen to podcasts. Why don't you listen to podcasts? So the other thing is demonstrating them in the classroom. So something like Quizlet, you could show them. Tell them they have to do it? No, you could again give them an option to try a few things, maybe come report back. If you wanted to have some kind of assignment with it. But again, in my case, I like to just show something, not like here are all these apps, but hey guys, I just saw this the other day, kind of end of class, beginning of class, or if you have a break, like right after the break or right before the break, this kind of thing, and just show it and demonstrate how to use it or discover how to use it together. You can also ask students, back to sharing strategies, what apps they use. So if you're watching this and you're an old person like me, you might think, well, I don't really know much about these apps because I don't know so much, but students might, right? And they can share with you and share with the class, or the opposite. Nobody knows anything, so you're discovering it yourself. You get some recommendations, and that's also demonstrating autonomous learning. Hey guys, I saw this website or this article rather that talked about the top speak apps for improving speaking. What do you think? I don't know these. Let's look into it. By the way, the next webinar I do with American TESOL Institute will be focusing on apps and AI for improving speaking. So we'll talk about some of these, like Elsa Speech and SpeechLink and others, in the next webinar. Teach learners how to use AI tools. This, I said earlier, also, I think should be another webinar, but let's just talk about the basics here. ChatGPT, that's a basic, can be so amazing for students. And what I would just say here is, if it's a chatbot, show how you can be used as a chatbot. If you don't know how to use ChatGPT, I would say definitely do that. Forget the other apps, forget all the other things. Just become a believer, because I think you will, in how it can be a good opportunity to chat. Doesn't mean that it's going to have it doesn't hallucinate. It doesn't mean that you feel comfortable putting all your personal information there, but everyday kind of chat opportunities, and with the speech text, right, that's coming, the speech to text and text to speech. Anyway, like I said, next month I'll do more on this, but definitely get into ChatGPT or some chatbot to show them that it can be a great way to practice conversation and writing. Let me give you an example with writing. What I do now with essay writing, and this is also to avoid cheating, but primarily to just promote their writing proficiency and their ability to reflect on errors and motivate them to learn autonomously and to feel more confident writing in English. So what I like to do is, in class, have them on paper with pen, no computer, no internet, respond to a prompt, something we prepared for, like expressing their opinion or summarizing, right? So, not just out of the blue, though that could be interesting too. But anyway, in this example, it's, for example, TOEFL, writing question number 1 in TOEFL. So they have to do that in the class because it's a TOEFL class. They're doing it on paper with a pen. But then what I do is I take that, I photocopy it. So I have their original, I give them back their original, and then I show them what they can do with a prompt with ChatGPT, where they can, in the past, they could just type it in to ChatGPT from their original, typing exactly what they wrote, mistakes included. And if they notice the mistakes, that's fine, but they have to put the mistakes in. Or now they can just take a picture of it. It's crazy. That's fine too. And then a prompt with ChatGPT, where they can ask ChatGPT to rewrite it, but without changing any of the content, right? Without keeping it their level, just changing grammar and vocabulary. By the way, this is something I used to do myself, and then have my students compare their version and my version. So now they can compare their version and ChatGPT version, reflect on that, right? So what mistakes were corrected and why and how. And after that, ask ChatGPT for a list of the changes it made and explanations for why, and then students can reflect on what they need to improve in terms of mistakes they're making with grammar or use of vocabulary. If you have the opportunity to chat with them one-on-one, either like I do on Teams or in person, great. If not, they can, in many cases, if you have too many students, take that experience and you can just say, hey, how did that go? You can do this yourself. So that's just been really successful for me, using ChatGPT for that. Play fluency cards. That's my card game to practice English, and that's going to come next time. So for now, it's free on Google Play. Just look up fluency cards. You can also play on my website, fluencymc.com, which is, by the way, where you can email me if you have a question or a comment, or you need something at support@fluencymc.com. I'll remind you about those things at the end. So fluency cards, definitely recommended. So we haven't really talked. We've all talked about the good news. a little bit about people can struggle, but let's look at three categories that are really, really important, and probably you've been thinking of some of these. So it's possible that you have students who have never thought about learning autonomously, especially if they've had kind of more traditional approach, right? So if they've always relied on teachers at direction, they expect that. How do you get them to not do that? In cases like this, that's where maybe it has backfired for me, where I've tried to teach explicit strategies for them to be autonomous learners. If they can't really connect to that idea of learning autonomously, it doesn't really work. And that also can depend on culture and education, which I have at the bottom here. So I'll wait to talk about that more. But here's where, they don't have to think, oh, I'm learning autonomously, right? It's more like they're learning when they're not looking. They get them hooked on something. They're learning English, but they're not thinking, oh, I'm doing this to learn English, right? Um, if they are at a point in their, if they're kids, lack of motivation or confidence, you can usually get kids motivated and confident, but they can also lose it, especially if they've had classes that are boring, teachers they don't like, or not enough practice with English, not enough fun things to do in English. So totally understand that this can happen. I hope what I've talked about today can give you ideas for how to work with students like that. But there are also some students who just maybe whatever you do, no matter what, it's just not going to happen for them. If you're in a situation where, the students or their parents, kind of frown on autonomous learning, or maybe not frown on that, but just kind of expect, okay, well, you're the teacher, we're paying for this, you are responsible for my students learning. That's back to the issue of, well, what do you do then? If maybe you don't teach directly, okay, you guys have to learn outside of class. Maybe it's more, you hope that the assignments you give are so interesting that what they bring to the class, they kind of continue to do things in English outside of class. Or what I mentioned just a moment ago, that idea of getting them hooked on something fun outside, which they don't connect to the learning part, and then learning in class. Back to that girl from Poland, because just maybe you remember, she was learning to play a game, learning from gamer English and movies and things for fun. But in the classroom, it was pretty traditional. Like I said, I talked to this teacher. So, in the classroom, she was soaking up all of the very teacher directed learning because she was doing these fun things outside the classroom, which when you think about it, we were defining learner autonomy. She was an autonomous learner, just not really thinking of herself that way necessarily. I said earlier I had something from ChatGPT to show you. So I just said to ChatGPT, I think the prompt was something like, what would you give teachers if could you make a chart of how to kind of ease in the idea of teaching learners to be autonomous? Because I don't make things like this. In the past, you could find them in a good article online or somebody else's webinar. But I think this is excellent. And ChatGPT, I don't always agree with everything, but on advice for how to teach and to plan lessons and things, I think it's extraordinary most of the time. Just how solid the advice is, how clear it is, and I think most importantly, how it can inspire you to then do other things. So not that you just take this and directly follow it, but that for the examples, for instance, doesn't have to be just Quizlet or like you could be like, oh yeah, in my case we're using this app or doing or this kind of task. So anyway, you can look at this if you like. I thought this was pretty good. So just a few things I wanted to make sure at the end to touch on, and I don't think there's anything that I haven't talked about is, I guess it's more emphasizing things that I think are most important on this topic. I've never had a final thought section, but I kind of like the idea. We'll see how it goes. One thing I talked about earlier, how AI is changing things, and I think the biggest thing it's going to change with language learning, and what learners' goals are going to be, what they feel is important to develop. It's going to be much more on the side of oracy, on speaking, whether it's in a business meeting, whether it's fun conversation in a school with other students in English, whether it's a presentation in English, compared to writing, right? So more real-time stuff. Students needing, if somebody asks them a question, to express their opinions. Now, has that always been important? Of course, but I believe it's going to be, not just the most important, maybe kind of the only thing we're really focusing on so much, because it will be easier to get help with translation, things that aren't real time, with writing, with communication that doesn't happen right now. So, oracy. That's going to be the most important thing to develop. So then how does that relate to the idea of autonomous learning and the idea of this and this and this, kind of everything, right? So I just wanted to say that if we agree that oracy is going to become more and more important, how does that, what kind of things outside of class should students be doing autonomously? Is it so much getting them to be autonomous at writing, or getting them to be autonomous at, learning more grammar? I think it's going to be more, right, how they can get more practice. And I don't mean real life. I think I put this here. Yes, the next one. I don't mean real life use outside the classroom. That's great, of course, speaking English at a pharmacy, in a business meeting, at school, whatever. But I mean, what can they do through repetition, through practice, which is the next thing here, to develop that. So let's just get right to it. Home is where you practice, class is where you rehearse, and then there's real life, which is, the school play, the job interview, the football match, the big day, right? So what I mean by home is where you practice. That's where you do repetition. Like when you practice the trumpet, you repeat, or you practice a dance. So are students motivated and autonomously doing this kind of practice at home? If it's speaking and listening practice that they're repeating, then I think that's the best. And I think we need to think everything I've talked about today, and other things I didn't mention. And if you have questions or comments, ways to build autonomy, please share them. But that they, always keeping in mind the idea of speaking and listening. I think I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. And then what I mean by classes where you rehearse, I think we need to help students feel like this is where we can make mistakes. Obviously, we need to make mistakes, but also where we are kind of, pretending to be the real world, and have it be a safe space where we can pretend and feel that way. Not that, when you speak in the classroom, it's the same as if you are in a real life situation. Yeah, we need to build that confidence of using English you practice in the classroom. And this connects to autonomy outside, because I think if they feel this way in the classroom, they're much more likely to practice outside of class. Which teachers will have jobs, the best jobs in the future? I think there will always be jobs for teachers, but which ones? So I mentioned this earlier. This is one I just wanted to reinforce, and it's just my opinion, but I believe two things. I believe teachers who really know how to leverage the tools that will not just like, because tech is so great, but it's just going to be, certain things are going to be better than in the classroom as a way of learning. But then what can happen in the classroom? I just mentioned that safe space, that rehearsal. What kind of teacher are you emotionally? Can you connect with students? Can you support them? Do they like you? Are you a fun person? Are you interesting as a person? You don't have to be, so fun or funny. These are the teachers who will have the jobs. And this is also, I think, what will have encouraged learners to be autonomous. And I think in the future, maybe this idea of autonomous learning will seem old fashioned because we're learning so much more outside the classroom, much more than we are in the classroom, which makes sense because we're outside the classroom more anyway. So if we're learning more outside the classroom and then come to class for a very specific purpose, then that's amazing. That's an evolution of teaching and learning. And those examples, annoying orange, the girl in Poland, well, the girl in Poland, it wasn't English in class. So the annoying orange example, or bringing in a newspaper, or, saying, oh yeah, this is a cool movie I just saw, modeling the learning as a way of hooking them, much more important, I believe, than more explicitly teaching them to be autonomous, though I'm not against it. So yeah, I think it's all about the hook and the spark. So as always, I end with talking about this idea, and it directly connects always to what we've just been focusing on. So when students repeat, build a base, and that repetition, especially to develop oracy, things they're listening to and repeating that are meaningful, that are fun, that connect to a goal in the classroom, or they just intrinsically enjoy it, right? Not for any purpose. That's going to build that base. And that is what's going to make them speak more accurately, understand more, read more accurately. And that accuracy will make them feel like, oh, wow, people understand me. I understand them. I feel more confident. And that confidence is what builds fluency. And if you've been with me in a webinar before, do you remember practice makes? If you say perfect, I'm not against it if perfect means, like we were saying with accuracy in that, in my little credo before about fluency. If we're talking about, right, trying to motivated to be more accurate, then practice makes perfect. Perfect is okay, not perfect, no mistakes, but practice makes progress is even better. And the best of all, at least to me, is the idea of it sticking in your head, the repetition, right? Stay in your head. You can go to class and do that rehearsal and feel comfortable, and then go out and use English in the real world. And I hope you agree, what we learn with pleasure, we never forget. And please feel free anytime. Email me if you want a PDF of this presentation. I'm happy to email you that. Just send it to support@fluencyMC.com. If you have a question or a comment, if you want to find out more about fluency cards, as I said, you can play them on my website, fluencymc.com. And next month, we'll be talking about tools to improve speaking. That brings us to the end of another American TESOL Institute webinar. Thank you so much for joining me. Hope wherever you are, you have a great day, a great evening, and yeah, see you next time. Keep going strong, teachers. I salute you. Peace, respect. Bye-bye.